Aramızda
thanks
Hasan
again.
Osman var.
Hassan is
Çok
a program
teşekkürler
management
Hasan bize
office
katıldığın için.
director, so PMO director at Cisco
Hasan
Systems, and
Cisco
where he
sistemde
leads global
PMO
virtual
direktörü olarak
teams
çalışıyor.
on delivering large and complex
Tüm
problems. And
dünyada
he's
sanal
a
uzaktan
known author
ekipleri
in
yönetiyor. Çok büyük
and has
ekip
several
projeler
best-selling books in
yönetiyor.
influencing virtual teams.
Bugüne
And
kadar
don't reply all.
çok
So
satan pek çok
thanks so
kitabın
much for
yazarı
joining us today,
Don't
Hassan.
Reply for All gibi. Hasan, çok teşekkürler bize katıldığın için. Söz sende.
All right, so just let me know, can you see that the screen is moving?
Ekranımı görebiliyor musunuz? Ekrandan ekrana geçerken.
All right.
Tamam o zaman.
Okay, great. So we thank you so much for joining. I apologize about the trouble and issues. This happens naturally with anything regarding technology, right? So welcome everyone. My name is Hassan Osman. What we'll be talking about today is managing remote teams and some best practices that are going to help you out with managing your own team. So here's what we'll talk about. I'll start quickly with a quick bio or background about myself. We'll talk a little bit about some virtual team statistics, and then we'll talk about the #1 reason why virtual teams fail. And then we'll cover 5 best practices and wrap it up with some Q&A. All right, so with that, let me give you a little bit of background. So as I said, my name is Hassan Osman. I am a PMO director at Cisco. I do have to say that views are my own and not those of Cisco. I lead a team of senior program managers who are all remote, and they deliver complex IT programs for Fortune 500 customers. I am also an author and an instructor. I'm the author of Influencing Virtual Teams and Don't Reply All, as well as an instructor on Udemy primarily and a few other places, but part of what's called the Udemy for Business instructor pool. I teach everything from how to manage remote teams to how to better have virtual meetings.
Çalışan ekiplere eğitim veriyorum sana.
The Venn diagram there on the bottom right is just a way in which I kind of present a little bit about my background. So the PM circle, I've been in project management for most of my career. I'm a PMP or project management professional. Before Cisco, I was at Ernst & Young as a management consultant, where I basically led a lot of teams working from home, as well as analyzing why projects fail. With virtual teams, that's been my experience for the past 12 plus years as well, as an academic doing some research, as well as working in this field as a practitioner. Started out as an entrepreneur and now part of Cisco Systems. And then finally, with productivity, I'm a big fan of how to always improve efficiency and productivity. And if you're ever interested in this space, Getting Things Done is an amazing book by David Allen. I highly recommend it. It will change your life. And really the intersection of those 3, virtual teams, project management, and productivity, is where I spend most of my time publishing articles, thought leadership, and what have you. That's where I blog as well on the couchmanager.com if you want to stay in touch, or you have follow-up questions that we don't get to today on this webinar. We will have some time at the end, I think, as Alp mentioned, to kind of talk a little bit about some questions there and open the mics for you. All right, so with that, let's move on to some statistics. So 1 in 5 workers in the world telecommute. This is a little bit outdated, but according to Reuters research, telecommuting is most popular in India, with over 50% of the workforce telecommuting, followed by countries such as Mexico, Indonesia, and the Philippines. And then 5 million employees work at home half-time or more in the US. This is 3.6% of the entire US workforce, according to Global Workplace Analytics. Of course, this is pre-coronavirus. Now it's obviously a lot higher. And then $44 billion in yearly productivity savings of US employers in 2015. Of course, that number is way higher, but according to Flex Jobs and US News, that was the data based on some productivity due to better work retention, better work-life balance, and which eventually leads to higher employee productivity. All right, so that all is one thing, but then now we are in interesting times, right? Many new headlines these days about companies ramping up on remote work due to COVID-19. to prevent spreading and the use of or leveraging social distancing. And Fortune magazine, CNN, and then Politico wrote a fantastic article about coronavirus and how it will change the world permanently. There were 34 big thinkers that they brought from multiple academic institutions and corporate world, and a couple of those are the rise of telemedicine, where healthcare is going to change in terms of you staying at home and your doctor calling you in so that you don't spread disease or what have you, or even for doctors to scale in different worlds where they're out of their home office, let's say, but they can treat many patients at different hospitals. Same thing with a professor at MIT analyzing that Congress can potentially go virtual. With this pandemic, obviously, you don't want the entire Congress to be in session, right? You don't want them all in one place because that could be detrimental to society. Another thing that really I thought was interesting is that Deborah Tannen, a professor of Georgetown, basically said that going forward, instead of asking, is there a reason to do this online, we'll be asking, is there any good reason to do this in person, right? So the scenario is going to basically flip in the way that we are going to be disrupted going forward. But of course, this is not all without its challenges, right? So basically, the Atlantic saying that the coronavirus is creating a huge stressful experiment in working from home. So it's not that easy. Similarly, Time is saying that this is making us all see that it's not that easy, or it's quite hard to make remote actually work. So what is all of that about? What is the main takeaway here? The main takeaway is that virtual teams are the future, right? Even before this coronavirus pandemic hit us, the trend was moving towards that future anyway. And if you think about the productivity savings, the employee satisfaction, and even the environmental benefits, right? The carbon footprint reduction, it was a win-win. And now, given this pandemic, it's heavily accelerated, and it is going to be inevitable, right? This is the future. This is where we're headed. And this is why webinars and conferences such as this one that Alp and the team put together are a great investment of your time and your workforce, right? Because you're getting to learn those skills that are going to be an excellent investment in your future. All right, so with that, let's talk about the number one reason why virtual teams fail. Now, I've worked with a lot of managers and teams, and based on my own experience and research, I can boil down the number one reason why virtual teams fail, to two words. And those two words are ineffective communication. Now, ineffective communication is this false assumption that what is being communicated to your virtual team is being 100% understood by them, when in fact it's mostly misunderstood. And ineffective communication is the absolute core reason why a team as a whole ends up not executing according to a plan, or being proactively engaged in getting a project done or getting their work done.
Devam ediyoruz şu an efendim. Ses karışacak ama devam ediyoruz.
And this leads to a huge waste of time for everyone. It leads to confusion among the team, long and useless meetings, and team members that are not accountable or responsible. So communication is very, very important. And the degree, or the greater the degree of team virtuality, right, the greater the number of your team members that are spread out in different locations or in different geographies, then the higher the importance of communication is, right? So as your team grows in size, again, whether it's in cultural differences or geography, then you have to take communication even more seriously. And this brings us to the first best practice, which is to avoid the cursive privilege. Now, let me take a step and say, presentations and I instruct, I write books and what have you. One thing that you can take from this presentation here today, let it be this, right? Because to me, the cursive knowledge is the root cause of all evil in communication, and it's a very, very hard problem to avoid. So what is the cursive knowledge? So when we communicate with someone, we falsely assume that they have the same knowledge that we have in our own minds. And I know this might be a little bit of a confusing definition, so to help explain it, let me tell you about the Tappers and Listener study. So the Tappers and Listeners study was a simple game that was conducted by Stanford University in the early 90s. And what they did was they separated people into two groups. Group A were the tappers and Group B were the listeners.
Tappers ve
And
listeners
the
diye.
tappers were given a list of very well-known songs, such as Happy Birthday
Çok
to
iyi
You or any of
bildikleri
the
şarkıları
lullabies.
vermişler. Mesela hep
And then each
Happy
tapper
Birthday
had to
to You
pick a
diye bir
song
şarkı veriyor.
and tap out the rhythm to a listener by
diyorlar ki,
knocking on a table, right? So they
Sen
stand across each other.
şarkıyı dinlerken böyle
And
masaya
the
vurarak
listener
eşlik
was
et,
then
ritim tut
supposed to
diyorlar.
guess the song by
Listener
listening to the tap.
dinleyenler de
And
hani
the interesting
sadece
thing was that the
masadaki
tappers were
ritmi
first asked to
dinleyerek
predict the
şarkıyı
odds
tahmin
that the
et
listeners
diyor.
would guess correctly.
Şimdi
And they guessed
masaya vurarak
50%.
ritim
So
tutanlar
they thought that
acaba
1 out of 2 were going to get this
bulabilecekler mi
correctly.
diyorlar.
However, the actual number that the listeners got
Ama
right was only 2.5%. So only 1 in
sadece
40
yani
got it
sadece
correctly.
40'ta biri
And this was very
sadece
shocking to the tappers.
ritimden
Some
şarkıyı
typical responses were,
anlayabiliyor ama
isn't this song
ritim tutanlar
obvious, or
nasıl
how can you be
yani
so
sen bu
stupid, right?
şarkıyı
They
nasıl
were really, really
bilmezsin,
annoyed.
çok tanınmış bir
And the
şarkı
reason
nasıl
why this
anlamazsın
happened
diyorlar.
was that when the tappers were tapping, they were hearing the songs in their own heads. And
Çünkü
it was
ritim tutan kendi
extremely hard
kafasında
for
şarkıyı
tappers to
dinliyor
imagine what
zaten.
it's like
Ve
to lack
ritim
that
tutan
knowledge. So this is the curse of
müziği
knowledge. It's the fact
dinlemeyelim
that the knowledge that the
durumunu
tappers had in their
anlamıyor.
heads of those songs actually cursed them. And this curse of knowledge phenomena is a powerful concept that
bu
occurs
bilgi
everywhere
laneti
and every day across every single
konsepti
culture. It happens for those of you who have kids. It happens between parents and their children. It happens between CEOs and their
anne baba
employees.
arasında oluyor,
And of
CEO
course,
ile
it happens
çalışanlar
between
arasında oluyor
remote team members, right?
ve uzaktan
And so it is a
çalışanlar
tricky
arasında oluyor.
problem
Yani
to avoid. But here's how to beat it. So here are some tactics to avoid the curse of knowledge. The first is to acknowledge that this phenomenon exists, right? And it exists in every single form of communication you make in your virtual team or your remote team. So whether it's in your emails, in your phone conversations, in your presentations, and your meetings, right? So just the fact that you're aware of it could help mitigate it a little bit. Another is to put yourself in the other person's shoes. So think of their experience, their background, their culture, and how they might be viewing what you're communicating. And then finally, simplify your message. Try to make it as concrete as possible before communicating it. So in my role at multiple companies that I've worked in, I work with a lot smarter engineers than I am, right? A lot of them are deep in their engineering world. And so I always tell them, explain this to me like I'm a 15-year-old, right? Try to kind of simplify the message so that I can understand it and I can act on it. All right, so that was the first best practice, avoiding the curse of knowledge. The second best practice is to over-communicate. Now, virtual teams and remote teams tend to be very siloed in nature, where everyone is working on their own thing, right? And this transactional feature leads to isolationism. This whole out of sight, out of mind thing kicks in, right? And the fact that you have a lack of body language and facial expressions makes the problem even worse. So to become more effective as a remote worker and leader, you want to put the effort to over-communicate with your team in this environment. And one topic I'd like to discuss here is what's called the Propinquity Effect. And this is a theory developed by psychologists at MIT, which basically states that the more you interact with someone, the more you'll like them and become friends with them. And repeat exposure through over-communication among your team will eventually lead to an increase in liking, which basically in turn leads to a stronger trust relationship. And I would argue that the opposite is also true, right? That a lack of interaction or repeat exposure would lead to what's called a distancing factor. So that's why it's important to over-communicate with your team. And here are some tactics that help you do that. The first is to stay in touch with your team members. At least, I like to say at least once every day or maybe every other day, even if it's not absolutely essential to do so. And you can have fun while doing it, right? I mean, an easy way to do this is just connect with them really quickly over instant messaging software, or maybe give them a quick call every once in a while just to check on things, right? Another is to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. So you want to be inclusive of your team's opinions and ask them to speak up whenever you're in a team. And keep in mind that in a virtual team, people are usually less vocal due to the lack of body language. So even if someone's actively agreeing, they might not be explicitly saying it because people cannot pick up on these subtleties like facial expressions. And so it's good to ask for what your team's thoughts are while you're in a remote meeting or in a remote setting. And then finally, send frequent FYI updates. FYI stands for your information. And this is another way you can over-communicate, where you send a quick update to your team members to let them know what you're doing. And the frequent part here is the important portion of this formula that you will help, it will help you stay up to date on what everyone else is doing and help everyone else as well, right? So it's bidirectional. All right, so that was the second tactic. The third is to leverage the pyramid of communication. And with that, let's talk about the main challenge of virtual or remote teams. The main challenge of remote teams is that they lack the common face-to-face interaction that is typically available in regular co-located teams. And really, at the end of the day, this is what differentiates remote teams from co-located teams. And to help explain this challenge, I'd like to talk about something called the team proximity spectrum. So think of a team's composition as being a point on a spectrum with 100% virtual team on one end and 100% co-located on the other end. And the idea is that if your current team is on point A of the spectrum, so this is a little bit closer to 100% virtual team, then changing the composition of the team so that it's on point B, which is closer to 100% co-located, will actually reduce the challenges faced by the team and increase intimacy, right? So how do you accomplish that? Well, the way you move from point A to point B and increase intimacy and cohesion, we look at what's called the pyramid of communication. The pyramid of communication is basically a little pyramid that shows the different technologies that are typically used to communicate within virtual teams. And the higher we are in the pyramid, the more intimate the form of communication and the better it is for the team's cohesive traits. So here's an example of a pyramid of communication, right? You've got email at the bottom and all the way up to face-to-face communication. And the idea here is that email is the least intimate form of communication with asynchronous communication. A little bit better than that is instant messaging and social media or internal social media to your company. Higher than that, or a little bit better, is phone and teleconferencing because you get the audio effects and the voice tonality. Even better than that is video conferencing because you get to see facial expressions. A step above that is telepresence, which is video conferencing on steroids. For those of you who are not aware, it's literally like using Zoom or Skype or WebEx, but you're sitting in a huge room and it's life size. You get the full impression there. And then, of course, the most intimate as social beings is face-to-face communication. So what do you do with this, right? So what do you use? How do you use this pyramid of communication? There are two things you should do. To increase that level of intimacy within the team, you should, one, move up the pyramid, and two, mix multiple levels of the pyramid, right? So here's an example of moving up the pyramid. So assuming you spend most of your time in email, right? That 95% of the time is just communicating by email. Then what you want to do is try taking it up a couple notches, have an audio conference with your team every once in a while, or even video conferencing to turn on video and get that facial expressions that help out with your communication style, right? Maybe on your status calls, you kind of mandate it saying, all right, once a week, we want to all turn on video just so that we get that level of intimacy. And another is to mix multiple levels of your pyramid. So assuming you spend most of your time on just audio conferencing, then you want to mix a couple of things as well. You try to use instant messaging. I know face-to-face
anlık mesaj
these days is a little bit tough because of the coronavirus, but in regular days, if you do have the budget, once every 6 months, maybe you get the team for an offsite to kind of build that team as well.
Ekibinizi bir yere toplarsınız, toplantı yaparsınız.
All right, so the tactics basically, just to recap, are to observe how you communicate today within your team, and then move up the pyramid and or mix multiple levels of the pyramid.
Çalışın, bir de piramidi farklı seviyelerde kullanmaya gayret edin. Bu da hani üçüncü örnek.
Best practice is to write assertive emails. Now, this is a topic that could be covered in an entire course. I've actually written a full book about this, but so very hard to kind of summarize it in just 2 minutes. But it's one of the best practices that I really think it's important to put out there. So a couple of problems with email. The first is that email is the second largest time waster for remote employees. The first is meetings. And second is that people don't read long emails anymore. They just scan them, right? There's this snazzy response now called TLDR, if you've ever heard of it. It stands for too long, didn't read.
Too long, yani çok uzunsa.
And the overall problems we have with email are really two things. One, I think it's a quantity problem. We get a lot of emails. And the other is a quality problem, where we get a lot of bad emails. So writing straight to the point emails is a win-win for you and your team. All right, so what are some tactics here? The first is common sense, right? Keep your emails short and concise. The sweet spot is to keep them at 5 sentences or less. There's even a whole website dedicated to that. And what you should also try to get to is get to the point of your email early on in your message, preferably in the first sentence or two, so that you don't waste your recipient's time with any fluff. And according to research by Carnegie Mellon University, the emails that are easy to address get answered faster. So if you keep your messages short and sweet, you'll gain the advantage that they will be addressed or responded to even faster, right? A second tip is to highlight your calls to action. Now, calls to action are the action items or tasks that you want your email recipient to accomplish. And because people don't have a lot of time to read and they just scan the emails, you should avoid burying your calls to action in multiple paragraphs. So a lot of times what I see is 8 paragraph long emails with an action request in like sentence 3 of paragraph 5. And that never works, right? It gets lost.
Cümlesinde müşteriden bir şey talep edersen kimse bunu
anlamaz. So that they are easily identified.
Bunları vurgulamanız lazım. Mesela madde yazmanız lazım ki insanlar hemen anlayabilsin.
And my default method is to list out each call to action in a separate bullet point, right? So just a separate bullet point and say,
işte madde listelemek.
John, please accomplish the following task.
Mesela John, lütfen şunu yapar mısın? Bera, sen de şunu yapar mısın falan gibi.
You can also use, bolding, make the bolding or italics or underline or different color fonts, whatever it is, but make them stand out in the email because again, people scan them.
Ama bir şekilde vurgulamanız lazım ki önemli mesajlar kaybolup gitmesin.
The fifth and final best practice is to set expectations with your team. So this kind of touches upon all the previous best practices that I just mentioned, in the sense that you want to communicate clearly about how you communicate, right? And let me give you an example of this. I once wrote an article called 8 Interpretations of Silence when Using Instant Messaging, which got quite a bit of traffic when I wrote this. And the premise of this is that when you have a typical back and forth conversation through instant messaging, you sometimes have the other person just go completely silent on you, right? I'm sure a lot of this happens, like even with WhatsApp these days and text, right? And you have no idea what happened. So from your perspective, that silence can be interpreted in many different ways. And here's like a little visual that kind of explains it. So you either read my message or you didn't read my message. If you read my message, you might be thinking about it. You might be ignoring me. You might disagree with what I said. Maybe you forgot to answer, or maybe you're working on it, right? And if you did not read my message, maybe you got disconnected, maybe you got a call and got distracted, or maybe you stepped away, right? And the takeaway here, I mean, any of those can happen, right? But the takeaway here is that you should set expectations by communicating proactively. So if you did read my message, maybe stating that you're thinking or that you need more time, acknowledging that you got the message, but you're working on it. And that would really help your recipient. And if you didn't read the message, then maybe signaling that you're away before you leave by setting, the status of your instant message tool to away or be right back would also help. And by the way, I know a lot of tools today actually show you that the person read the message, right? Like WhatsApp or WebEx Teams or whatever. You can actually tell if someone received it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they actually read it. Sometimes the people could be distracted. Sometimes they could just have multiple windows open and it shows up. So this is why it's very important to have those expectations set. So here are a few takeaways and tactics. The first is to assess your team's communication style, and every team is different. And you want to make sure that it's working for your own group, right? For example, some teams like to batch email twice a day. They only like to read or respond to email twice every day. Does that really work for you or your team, right? Do you prefer text messages instead of phone calls? All those types of questions help, right? And then you want to have a quick meeting dedicated to communication. And this doesn't have to be formal, right? You don't have to have a very structured meeting. All you have to do is just sort of talk about maybe the frequency of updates on a project. How often do you want to meet? Do you want to meet once every 2 weeks? Once every week? And then also talk about things like what best tool should we use for urgent versus non-urgent requests, right? For example, when do you want to use instant messaging? When do you want to use the phone? When do we want to use the email? With some teams, email is 24 hours and we'll get back to you. But if something is super urgent, please text me instead, right, on my phone. And then another thing you also want to talk about is some time zones and potential meeting times that work for your team. If you are in different countries too, right? To kind of talk about, all right, between 9 a.m. and noon, this is the best time for us to meet as a team. So keep that calendar clear for client meetings, right? And then finally, some people even have an email charter. It kind of outlines the rules of using email, even though it sounds silly, but it helps because, again, email is the second time waster of your work, so you want to be effective. All right, so that covers all the best practices. Just as a quick summary, keep in mind that the #1 reason for failure is ineffective communication, and whenever you can focus on that, you're going to be successful in terms of ensuring you've got the right communication within your team. Avoid the curse of knowledge, which is the root cause of all evil in communication. Over-communicate with your team by staying in touch, once every day or every couple of days, just so that you keep that level of efficiency going. Leverage the pyramid of communication to increase cohesion within the team. Remember to either move up the pyramid or mix multiple levels of the pyramid. Then write assertive emails, keep them short and concise, and then highlight your calls to action. And set expectations with your team. Maybe have some sort of meeting to get together and discuss the rules of engagement, whether it's email, whether it's how to communicate for urgent versus non-urgent tasks. All right, so with that, we can definitely open it up for Q&A. Just as a reminder, you can definitely be in touch with me on the blog. If you want to connect on LinkedIn or what have you, I'd be happy to. I have my email address there too if we don't get to your question today. All right, so Alp or Dragoman, back to you.
Thank you very much, Hassan.
Thank you.
Would you okay, let's turn on the video. So first of all, apologies for the difficulty in the translation part.
No worries.
Did you hear both audio?
Yeah. Yes. How did my audio turn out? Because I'm hearing the feedback the whole time, so I wasn't sure. Sometimes it's hard when you're not listening to yourself to know how it's showing up.
Okay. So sorry for this. In the
no worries.
Morning call, it went well. It can be an update issue, but we will fix this in the next one. So sorry for local speakers. Sorry for just English speakers, and apologies, Hassan, for hearing both
No worries.
Okay. So, Hassan, thanks so much, because we had to handle this stuff. I also missed some of the parts. But what do you think about? First of all, do we have any questions from the attendees? Please ask on the Q&A part. And so, Hassan, you said if there is one thing to take away, and in the beginning, so can you elaborate more on that part?
Yeah. So. I was talking about the curse of knowledge, right? Which is the idea that in our own head, we have an understanding of something, and so we have a hard time communicating it out. That's why sometimes you have experts in, let's say, medicine or engineering that could be fantastic at what they do, but they are horrible teachers, right? I mean, those two are not always the same thing. And that's because, and the reason is because of this curse of knowledge, is the information in their own head can't be easily translated to someone who has a different base of knowledge. And in virtual teams or remote teams, this Alp gets exacerbated. It gets even worse because of the lack of, body language or face-to-face interaction or what have you. And so my takeaway on that is that you have to be, first of all, aware of it, right? Just the fact that you know it exists can help you a little bit with your messaging. And then two, try to simplify your messages, right? There's this movie by Denzel Washington. It's an old movie called Philadelphia. And a lot of it is, if you remember it, he's a lawyer in that call. And a lot of times he speaks to people who are experts and he goes, listen, explain this to me like I'm a 12-year-old. Right? Like try to kind of dumb down the message so that I get it and simplify it where I don't need to, I use big words. So a lot of times this also helps, right? Try to kind of simplify the message.
Yes, but this is also for, şöyle bir şey söyledi Hasan. Dedi ki özellikle sanalda iletişim kanalları çok farklı ya da yanlış anlaşılabiliyor. Onun için çok basit anlatmamız lazım dedi. Buna dikkat etmemiz lazım dedi. Hassan, and in that case, like I also understand what you're saying is like some people have better knowledge and some people don't, and you also can't understand this. Is that one of the things you are also trying to emphasize on?
Not really, no, because regardless of the type of knowledge that you have, it's how you explain it to the recipient that matters, right? So that's the key takeaway here. It's not so much that you know more than they do. It's you want to communicate about them doing a certain, let's say, PowerPoint presentation and say, all right, I need 4 slides in PowerPoint, but then you realize that they don't even know what PowerPoint is, right? So that's the discrepancy, is that it's sort of the knowledge in your own head makes assumptions about this is what they know and versus what they don't.
Okay, so great. So a couple of questions from our attendees. So one says there were 2 problems with the emails and one is too long. And can you tell the other problem?
Yeah, let me kind of quickly go back to this.
Yeah. I think this is coming from Fatma Gür.
Yes. Oh, the problems with the emails. Yeah. So we have 2 problems. I always say there's a quantity problem and a quality problem. So the quantity problem is we get too much email, and the quality problem is we get a lot of bad emails, right? And I was saying, Fatma, that there's a full course I have on this and a book, but really quickly, some of the best practices here is to keep your emails short, 5 sentences or less is ideal because people don't have a lot of time to read these days. And then highlighting your calls to action. So if you have a specific request for your team members, or you need someone to do something, you want to highlight them very simply. And I'll add a quick tip here for you. I use something called the 3 W's.
Can you just give one moment? So I'll translate. E-maillerimizi çok kısa yapalım diyor. Hasan, yani hakikaten 5 cümle olması lazım diyor, daha fazla değil ve birine bir aksiyon varsa onu vurgulayalım, highlight edelim diyor. Okay.
Yep, and so the 3 W's are who, what, and when. So if you need someone to do a specific action, you need to identify who they are. So Alp, for example, you want to be very crisp about what you need. Please send me the status report, and then when, a specific deadline. By Thursday, 5 p.m. Turkish time, right? So being very specific with the call to actions makes life a lot easier for you and your recipient.
Okay, but that's always the same for on-site also. Is there any different for remote in that sense?
No, honestly, that applies to both online and offline. But we have a tendency online to be a little bit more verbose in the email and hide, subject matters or action items within like the 7th paragraph and the 3rd sentence, right? That's sort of a little bit. So remote teams usually use a lot more email than co-located ones. So that's part of the reason.
Okay. Şöyle bir şey söyledi Hasan. Yani kime söylediğini, ne söylediğini ve onun ne kadar süre içinde bitmesi gerektiğini net söylemek belki fizikselden bile daha önemli dedi. Normalde de önemli diye konuştuk ama fizikselden bile daha önemli. Burada çok net olmamız lazım. Yani kısa tutalım ve kim, ne ve ne zaman. Kim yapacak, ne yapacak ve ne zaman yapacağı çok net bir şekilde ortaya koyalım. Yes, so Hassan, okay, so do you have time for one last question? Because
absolutely.
Busy. So, okay, this one is coming from Sunny Levy. So he says, what do you think about the sectoral differences? Do you think that advertising agencies can work out, but production-based companies cannot? Or in terms of different sectors, like do you have anything specific?
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that point, Sani, that every industry is a little bit different. Construction industry is going to have a lot harder time to move to remote and home-based work than marketing agencies, for example, or tech-based industries for sure, because a lot of that type of work is conducive to that. So it differs from one sector to another, but eventually we're going to get there. Healthcare, for example, it's still a little bit tricky, but we do have like robotic surgery now where the doctor is in Boston and can do surgery in Istanbul. Mm-hmm. So things in different sectors will take a little bit of time, but overall it varies from one to another for sure.
Okay. Hızlıca çevireyim. Evet, tabii ki sektörlere göre, yani bir üretim sektörüyle reklam ya da teknoloji sektörünün bunu uygulama tarzı ve seviyesi çok değişecek diyor. Ama hepsinde de avantajlar var. Ama baktığınızda sağlıkta bile şu anda uzun menzilli ameliyatlar bile başladı. Onun için bir yerinden mutlaka uygulamamız lazım. Çünkü avantajlarını görmemiz lazım dedi. One last question. How about the ratio of phone calls versus video conference with the internal team?
Yeah, so if we go back to the pyramid of communication that I was saying, I would say if you have a higher ratio of video conferencing to phone calls, that's even better. Right now, we're turning on video. It's a different type of feel to it than if we were just on audio, right? It has a much different level of cohesion and intimacy overall. So it varies from team to team, but I would highly encourage you to kind of move up the pyramid whenever you get the chance.
Okay, so moving up the pyramid is video, right?
Correct. So, phone is below video, instant messaging is below phone, and email is below instant messaging, right? So the driest form is email.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Hassan.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So it's been a great, amazing knowledge. And are you from Lebanon? Am I right?
Yeah, I'm Lebanese. Okay. So even though, by the way, a lot of people think I'm Turkish because Hassan is a very common Turkish name and Osman. So it's like they start talking Turkish to me immediately. I was like, sorry, I don't understand.
So you have two Turkish names.
Yeah.
I am originally from Adana, if you know Adana.
Of course.
Yeah, so we are pretty close regions.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for this.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining, and we apologize for the technical issues. We are going to make them better.
No worries.
But amazing insights, so thank you so much.
Happy to share them. Take care and best of luck.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Herkese, thanks to everyone for attending. So for the next session, it will be at 4 p.m. with Karen Lagraf. She's going to talk about many policies and how do you manage chaos inside of the crisis. She's very experienced with large corporates, so as well as being a remote worker herself. So looking to that session at 4 p.m. Herkese katılım için teşekkürler. Teknik sorunları çözeceğiz. Özellikle çeviriyle ilgili sorunları anladığımız kadarıyla versiyonlar arasındaki bir farktan kaynaklandı. Saat 4'te Karen'la buluşacağız. Karen büyük kurumsal firmalarda iyi tecrübesi var. Kendisinin de uzaktan çalışma konusunda tecrübeleri var. Onları dinleyeceğiz. Herkese çok teşekkürler. Görüşmek üzere.